Hi guys, this is Laura. I just wanted to start to introduce you to something that hopefully you could all have access to, which is CAD software on your computer. So right now I'm in Rhino. The particular type of Rhino I have is Rhino 5.0. They just released the 6 version as well, if you're more interested in that. And the reason why I say that it's more accessible is because it works on both Macs and PCs. It's a little bit better on PCs. And you can either buy an educational license from noveg.com for $140, and that license lasts an entire lifetime. It doesn't expire at the end of the year. Or you can download a 90-day free trial just to test it out and see if you like the software. So that's part of the reason why we recommend it. There are a lot of other 3D CAD softwares around, but most of them tend to have licenses that only last for a single year or that are only really affordable if you're a large company and not an individual. So I am using a mouse rather than a touchpad. The great thing about a mouse is because it has a left and right click button and a scroll, I can really have a lot of control when I'm drawing something in this software. And the first thing I'm going to do now that my Rhino is open is I'm going to say File, New, and I'm going to select Small Objects in Inches. So a small object in Rhino qualifies as anything as the size of a truck or smaller, which is pretty much going to be all furniture projects. And I'm going to open that new file and it will replace itself. So now you can see I have 4 different viewpoints. I have top, front, right, and perspective. So those of you that did your orthographic drawings for your step stool, this will look like a pretty familiar configuration. So right now I can double click on top and it will bring me into the top view. You can see that there's a grid, and the grid is divided into 4, which symbolizes quarters of an inch since we're working within inches. And there's a red line, which symbolizes the x-axis, and a green line, which symbolizes the y-axis. And then also, because this is a 3D environment, there's also a z-axis to symbolize height. But we'll get a little bit more into that later. Just sort of navigating around in this environment, you can see I have a ton of options for different commands, both in the bar up ahead, on the sidebar, and then also in the command bar here. So pretty much any time that you're stuck and you're not sure exactly what command you're looking for, you can either start scrolling through these pieces. This symbolizes anything, any sort of command related to a surface. This one symbolizes any command related to a solid. Or you could just start typing stuff at random in the command bar, and it will start to give you suggestions. So I typed EX, and it gives me exit, explode, export, extend, extract, extrude. And the command bar is actually smart as well. So the more you use certain commands, the more likely it is to suggest those commands to you. Another type of tool in Rhino is the snaps. So you can see all along the bottom here, the snaps that I'm currently using, O-snap and gumball, are highlighted, and the snaps that I could turn on are not highlighted. So just going into my top view here, and I guess I should mention to navigate around in this environment, I'm going to be using my right click option. So if I right click and drag, I can drag around very easily. And if I use my scroll, I can zoom in and out. So same with my perspective view. My right click and drag, I'm kind of treating this like a camera. And the camera is always going to automatically sort of center on the origin point. So if you have something drawn that's way off on the edge, it's going to be a little bit more difficult just sort of scrolling around it and looking at the object from all views. Okay, but to go back to my snaps, so this line here is a line command. So you can see if I right click, or I think even if I just hold it, it gives me all these different options for a line that I could draw. And the simplest line to draw will be this polyline command. So I'll go into that and I'll start playing around with my different snaps. So right now I'll turn off all of my snaps and only turn them on one at a time. So for the grid snap, it's going to snap to the nearest 1/4 of an inch on the grid. So this can be really useful if you're drawing something that all the dimensions are made out of whole numbers, or at least numbers to within the nearest 1/4 of an inch. But it can also kind of get in your way if you're trying to draw something based off of geometry and not off of measurements. So I'm going to turn that guy off now. Ortho means that any line that I draw is either going to snap to the X or Y or Z axis. So you can see it's only letting me go in those 3 directions. And anytime I want to get out of a command, I can either right click or I can press escape. Both of them work. Planar. I actually don't remember what planar does. I'll have to look that up actually. So if I go onto the help tab here, just type planar, and it will explain to me any kind of command, and then it will typically even offer a little video in the explanation. Okay, so what planar does, it's not super relevant with no geometry drawn here at all, but all it does is that it snaps it to the same plane. So right now everything is in the 0 plane because we haven't built up any height to objects yet. But once you've built up a bunch of geometry, you'll find, especially with your snaps, it'll start snapping to stuff at different heights when you want it to stay within the same plane. So that'll probably come up later. O-snap is going to be one of the most versatile snaps that you can do. So you see when I click into O-snap, all of these commands become highlighted. So basically I can choose to snap to endpoints, to near any kind of geometry, to a point, which is that can be really useful if I have a whole bunch of lines all sort of overlapping each other and I need to pick a very particular point. I can actually set a point on the geometry and it will snap to that point every single time. And you can see it also cues me as well. When I hover over it, it says point, and it automatically centers itself on that. Midpoint, center. Center is a little bit of a weird one, so if I draw a rectangle here, and I want to snap to the center of that rectangle, if I hover over the actual center of the rectangle, nothing is really going to happen. But if I hover over the outer edge of the rectangle, it will snap to the center point. So that one's a little bit weird. Let's see. Intersections. So snap to anything that is an intersection. Here's the end point, here's the midpoint. Perpendicular can be really useful, especially if you're working with circles. Tangent, also very useful. Quad, that's going to snap to basically the highest and lowest points of any kind of geometry. Also really useful in circles, so I'm just going to draw a quick circle here. And you can see it snaps to the furthest left point, this furthest right point, the the highest point and the lowest point. The rest of these guys, these will come more useful as you advance in Rhino. Disable can be a useful one if you want to just temporarily disable your snaps and not have to manually uncheck them. For the most part, when I'm working, I usually have my end snap, my mid snap, my intersection, and then I click on the others on an as needed basis. Smart Track can be a little bit confusing. Basically, Smart Track tries to relate objects to each other. So if I wanted to draw a line where, I'll have to have my O snap on for this, to draw a line where this end point here would intersect vertically with this rectangle, you can see that gray line will actually project where that intersection should be. And then it also gives me the angle that stuff is intersecting as well. Okay, and then Gumball is a new feature. Basically, anytime you click on an object and Gumball, it's in the Gumball snap. This configuration will appear, so I'll have a green arrow to symbolize the y-axis, a red arrow to symbolize the x-axis, and a blue curve to symbolize an angle. So I can use this to move these around just along the x and y axis, or I could click on them like this and say -1, and that will move it down an inch down closer to the x-axis. Same with the angle. I can say 15 degrees and it will move to 15 degrees, or I can just freely turn it around back and forth. Gumball can sometimes be a little bit cumbersome just because you have these giant arrows in the way when you're trying to look at an object, but I think it can be pretty useful for very specific purposes. So another thing I wanted to show you guys, properties. So I don't often check these out, but they can be very useful for trying to evaluate a specific geometry. So this circle I've highlighted, and under properties it says it's a closed curve, meaning that it's not open, so I could start to extrude like a cylinder from this or a sphere, and I won't run into technical difficulties. And then it doesn't have too much more information about it. And then my layers tab is also going to be really important as I start to build up geometry. So I have a default layer, which I'm drawing in right now. If I ever want to change a layer, I just double click on it. If I ever want to rename a layer, I click on it once. And I'll often have like a slush layer that I put everything that isn't quite useful to me, but I don't want to delete it completely. And then say if I want to put something in my slush layer, so I'll put all of this geometry in my slush layer. I'll right click on slush, and I'll say change object layer. So you can see now all of this is red now because it's all on the slush layer. And then if I go back to default, I have some options for the visibility of these pieces on the slush layer. So I can either make it invisible by clicking on this light bulb, or I can make it locked, meaning that nothing, regardless of the snaps that I have on, oh, I guess it could still snap to it, but I can't physically move any of this geometry, so it's fixed in place until I unlock it. I could also, if I'm looking at this geometry and I don't want all of it to disappear with the light bulb, but I just want it to temporarily go away so I have easier access to it. So you see I can't actually click on it right now because it's locked, so I'll unlock that. And I could say hide, spelled correctly. And then when I'm ready to see that circle again, I'll just say show, and it will pop back up again. And then you can see there's a whole bunch of options. I can change my line type, so I could have hidden lines. I can change the line width if I wanted to print this out. I could change material if I wanted to render it. Or I could change the color of the line to make it more visible. So that is the basic tour. I'm going to draw the tool tote now, so that way you guys could draw something that's actually relevant to you all. And then hopefully as I use the commands drawing the tool tote, it will be a little bit more organic than just sort of explaining things from the top. So I'm going to exit out of this video now and start a new video, but first thing I'm going to do is save it. So you can save Rhino files either in Rhino, and you can see I could also save down to another version of Rhino. You can save it as an Illustrator file and edit it in Illustrator, and then the most universal file for CAD is a DXF file. Should be STL is also very commonly used, especially with 3D printing. PDFs are also really universal. There's the DXF. So DXF is kind of like regardless of the 3D software someone else might have, you can send them a DXF file and they will be able to open it up in their 3D software and continue to manipulate it. Versus if you put it into an Illustrator file or a PDF file, it's kind of like locked in to that particular geometry. I usually only use PDF or Illustrator if I want to print something out, but if I want to send something to, say, a machine shop or a 3D print lab, I will put it in either DXF or STL. In this case, I'm just going to save it as a Rhino because I'm going to continue to use it. Cool. And then anytime I'm kind of stuck, I can either start going into my command bar, or I can go to this help tab here. But the command bar is really helpful. So if I go into my line, it's going to prompt me through all the steps of the command. So right now it's saying start of polyline. So I can either snap on to one of my geometry here, or let's say I wanted to start at the origin, I could say 0, 0. And now I have a snap to my origin. And now it's telling me the next point of the polyline. So say I want it to be 3 inches tall. I could say 3, return, and now you can see it's snapped into 3 inches, and now all I have to do is determine the angle. So now I can either go into my ortho to make this straight up and down, or I could just hold my shift key and it will automatically jump to ortho. So I'll just click it once, and you can see now I'm set up to draw a second line. So if I don't want to draw a second line, the command bar is telling me what to do, which is press enter when done. So I'm done, so I'm going to press enter, and now I have my line. So I'll go more into this as we draw the tool tote, and I'll finish this video up now.